This is Uncle Don, and he's got a huge problem. See, just a few weeks ago, Uncle Don and Uncle Benji attacked Iran, leading to yet another new war in the Middle East. So much for the Board of Peace and no more wars, huh? Oh, sorry. This isn't a war, at least according to Uncle Don and the US jungle government. Why? Because they've taken a page out of Uncle Vlad's. But interestingly, just days after the operation began, Uncle Don has gone on a victory lap with the press, claiming the war has been won.
Woo, yeah! Woo!
And that Iran is on its last legs. Except that's not what's happening. Because how can a war be won if we're still debating sending in a ground invasion? And if the so-called adversaries are already vanquished, why is the US jungle quietly recalling military assets from South Korea? Why is the US Energy Secretary telling reporters this could all be wrapped up in a few weeks? But look at the US jungle's questionable track record in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's clear that something isn't adding up, and the world has taken notice. Jungles around the globe scramble to release emergency reserves of oil. Rationing has already begun, and unrest is growing everywhere. Because to anyone following the situation, it's becoming clear, and not just for the US and its allies, but for the entire world. We're already seeing glimpses of this here, in the Strait of Hormuz, and more importantly, its neighbors, the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC. See, these few countries sit on a huge share of the world's oil reserves. And in a post-industrial world, oil is the lifeblood of the economy, whose supply is dictated by none other than the US jungle. So what happens when the oil stops flowing? This is the petrodollar wars explained. So how exactly did oil make the US jungle so powerful? It all started decades ago, in the 1970s, with the secret deal between the Saudi oasis and the US jungle. Hence dubbed the petrodollar. In return, the US jungle would provide military protection for the oasis.
Decades after. Here's how it works. Let's say the Indian jungle wants to buy oil to power their energy grids. They try to buy oil from
Nope. Can't do that, because the oasis selling oil only accepts payment in US bananas.
Jungles have no choice but to buy US bananas using their local currency. Otherwise, their jungle will suffer economics. Over the next couple of decades, as the world's jungles industrialized and began manufacturing, their need for oil grew. Because of growing demand for oil, and soon, the US banana becomes the most powerful currency in the world. Not because monkeys love the US jungle, but because they literally have But what happens when this economic dominance is challenged? Wait, hold on. How is that even possible? Because the US
That's all true, except that Iran has a secret weapon. Geography. See, as the dominant regional power, it's this very narrow waterway which holds this entire petrodollar agreement in the balance. Because roughly 20%. So whoever controls the Strait of Hormuz is holding a metaphorical knife to the throat of the global economy. More importantly, they also have the missiles.
And Iran knows this all too well, because they've now halted oil exports from the Middle East. A disaster for the US told.
And when demand drops, US bananas lose their value. And soon the entire US jungle economy will start to feel the heat.
Which temporarily props up demand as jungles are scrambling to buy up what's left. But remember, this is a race to the—
And they're already looking. There's nothing left propping up the value of the US banana anymore. Don't take it from Monkey, this is literally playing out as we're working on this video.
Because a senior Iranian official confirmed that Iran is willing to reopen the strait with a big—
by Iran shuttering the world's most critical oil choke point. And when that demand collapses, particularly among America's closest Gulf allies, the GCC. So who exactly are the GCC, and why is this war practically Armageddon for them? See, the GCC comprises Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Oman.
But under the petrodollar system, these jungle states were practically untouchable. They'd pump oil.
Because of this partnership, both a regional alliance and a major economic power benefit significantly. And for decades, it worked beautifully. That was until the Strait of Hormuz was shuttered. Because here's what nobody in the White Tree House seemed to account for.
The GCC isn't just facing an export crisis. It's facing an existential one. These aren't jungle state oils. Take that away, all you've got left is a couple of luxury cities pockmarking the desert. Nothing more. But here's the painful irony. They're
nowhere to be found, and Iran isn't holding back. Because soon after the special military operation commenced, Iran fired retaliatory missiles and drones tearing through airports, refineries, and the shining hotels that made cities like Dubai famous. But see, the GCC doesn't just export oil through the Strait of Hormuz. They import almost everything else through it too. Food, medicine, raw materials. All that through this tiny channel? That's closed till further notice. But that's not even close to the worst part, because up to 90% of the GCC's drinking water is now at risk. That water doesn't fall from the sky. It's facilities that need enormous amounts of energy to keep running, energy that Iran is now actively targeting. So let's get this straight. No oil going out. The GCC goes bankrupt. US banana value plummets. No revenue or means to import food. No power to keep the desalination planning. So where the hell is the US jungle in all of this? Why did they even start this war in the first place when they can't protect their, quote, allies? See first, Uncle Don says it's about protecting US citizen monkeys from imminent Iranian threats. Fair enough, right? Except the Pentagon itself, so that's a dud. Okay, fine, moving on. Same speech. Actually, this is about helping the average citizens of a specific nation challenge.
The current Iranian regime isn't great either. Just take a look at their violent crackdown against protests throughout 2025. But wait, because days later, a prominent leader is now talking about taking decisive and swift action against a specific nation, and then negotiate with it? Who exactly are you calling when it's time to sign the peace treaty?
With a foreign leader, except that a major economic power secured him. The major economic power did not do that with a specific nation.
That the US jungle knew Israel was about to attack Iran anyways, and decided it was better to go first. Which, reminder, was during New
5. All from government sources, all contradicting each other. And remember, you've seen this episode before. Just look at 2003 in the same minute.
Just swap out the WMDs for a nuclear program. Meanwhile, while all of this is playing out at the top of the jungle economy back early.
But a business nonetheless. And a very, very costly one at that. See, we're talking almost $1 billion US.
That was already spiraling before any of this started. And because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, gasoline prices are skyrocketing, significantly improving life for Kurons. And because modern life depends so heavily on oil for energy grids, things like electricity bills, gas bills, things were already looking bleak before the first projectiles were launched. And now, for many individuals, the resource shortage might be the thing that...
Which raises a terrifying question. If inflation is already this bad while it's being actively controlled, how bad does it get if this drags on?
If the US banana eventually loses its dominance, and we're already watching that happen right now, with Iran debating opening the strait to tankers, and because a major power's economic strength weakens, things become even more expensive. One is tired of this situation, that Iran's on the verge of collapse, that this all blows over in a few weeks. He's trying to protect confidence in the system by precious adding. And while the conflict continues intensely, it's once again the common individuals paying the price. And what's concerning is that
because of the conflict, life is changing all around the globe, and not for the better. A tea farmer is watching his exports rot.
A student was sent home from school, not because of exams, but because the government needed to cut energy use. Parents... It's already here. It's easy to sit and watch the war unfold on our screens, but we need to understand that this isn't just a...
Look, we like to end these videos on a positive note when we can, but this story is genuinely terrifying. Still, our videos are our little way of fighting the good fight, because the more monkeys know what's happening, the better. And maybe one day,
we'll be covering this story as it develops. So the next time you see the petrodollar wars being discussed on the news, you'll know what's going on behind the scenes.